Let me begin by saying who we are and why Black military history is important. We're comprised of 21 Black veteran organizations whose focus is education. We represent a unity of purpose calling for a greater representation of our military history in public education. The history is important. Quoting an old friend of mine named Samuel Waller, "They write you out of the future by writing you out of the past." Our military history is the cornerstone of Black Americans' claim for equal rights and opportunities. Our military participation has served as the basis for that claim since the Civil War. The history documents our claim. Our military history goes back to the colonial era where Black Minutemen served in the Continental era. Christmas Addis, a Black dock worker, was among the first to fall in the event known as the Boston Massacre in 1770, sparking the Revolutionary War in 1775. It recalls a verse I wrote some years ago that I'd like to share with you, titled "Among the First to Fall." I wrote it with the thought, it's important the what and the whys of the history is told. You know, history can make you look pretty stupid when you don't understand the why. The verse goes like this. In the winter of 1770, the colonial days of old, an incident took place in Boston, so the history is told. The King of England ordered a tax payable on products arriving by sea. The proclamation outraged the colonists, so they filled the harbor with his tea. On March the 5th, a cold winter's day, the colonists gathered in the town square to formally voice their protest that the taxes were unfair. They were met by the British redcoats, and fire was the order called. As the shots heard around the world rang out, Christmas Addis was among the first to fall. Freedom and justice became the cry that day. Liberty became the call. After that infamous incident, they knew the crown must fall. The revolution began that winter's day. Yes, the crown did fall. But the question that lingers in many minds is, why did Addis answer at all? For he was born into slavery, but in his quest to be free, he escaped the chains of bondage and took to life at sea. Slavery was the norm those days. In the South, the law of the land. And although chattel in the South, in the North, he was a free man. He worked the harbor of Boston, unloading cargo arriving by sea. The proclamation the king had issued imposed on his liberty. So when the word was passed about the meeting in town square, it was only natural for Christmas Addis to be there. He took his stand for freedom, justice for us all, and in the name of liberty, he was among the first to fall. Over 5,000 Black soldiers served in the Continental Army. Some were slaves and some were freemen. Our participation has intersected with the civil rights movement since the Civil War. Quoting the great Frederick Douglass, "Once let a Black man get up on his person the brass letters US. Let him get an eagle on his button and a musket on his shoulders and bullets in his pockets, and there's no power on earth which can deny that he has earned the right to citizenship in these United States of America." End quote. Black Americans made tremendous contribution in the winning of the Civil War. Following the war, Black enlistment was reduced, then restricted in the armed forces. In 1866, the United States Senate passed a bill establishing 67 Black regiments. The bill called for 6 of the regiments to be composed of Black troops. The bill was modified, reducing the number of Black regiments to 4, the 9th and 10th Cavalries, and the 24th and 25th Infantry Regiments. Their mission was to protect the settlers moving west, guarding the mail, protecting the railroad, and suppressing Indian uprisings. I still believe a discussion is due between Black veterans and our Native American brothers and sisters. However, that's a discussion for another day. We're here today to set a flag and honor the soldier we have dubbed the Golden Buffalo, Colonel Charles Young. Let me tell you about the soldier who introduced me to the history of Colonel Young. His name was Samuel Waller. Sergeant Waller served in the 24th Infantry Regiment in the Spanish-American War. He, like Colonel Young, was a career soldier. The career soldiers knew each other. Sergeant Waller and Colonel Charles Young were friends. Sam became a friend of mine. I met Sam when he had been declared a ward of the state of California. He was 98 years old, totally blind, and living alone in Los Angeles with no known relatives at the time the state stepped in. He was sent to the Veterans Home in Yountville, California. I was informed of his expected arrival and invited to become a member of the unofficial welcoming committee. Sam became a part of my family. I made the trip on weekends, rain or shine. On nice days, with the help of the nurses, we would get Sam up in the wheelchair and stroll the grounds. When the weather didn't permit, I would pull up my chair to his bedside. He loved to talk about his military days. He vividly recalled days in the jungles of the Philippine Islands in 1901 as if it had just happened. I did mention he was hard of hearing. Once Sam started on a reflection, you were captured until the end of the story. He spoke of Captain Charles Young as if he was larger than life. Sergeant Waller told me Captain Young was the pride of all black soldiers. His stories sparked my interest to learn more about the man who Sam said was the best officer in the United States Army. According to Sergeant Waller, had it not been for his color, he would have been a general. As a student of military history, it was inevitable that I would come upon Colonel Young in my research. His importance in the history makes him impossible to miss. However, I credit Sergeant Waller with my early introduction. Charles Young was the 4th black admitted to the military academy at West Point, the 3rd black graduate of the academy, and the highest ranking black officer in the United States Armed Forces for the better part of his military career. We've heard from historian Brian Shellam, the author of Black Officers in the Buffalo Soldiers Regiment, The Military Career of Charles Young. Brian's chronology of the colonel's life is excellent. There is no need for me to repeat that history. Instead, I'd like to talk for a few minutes about Charles Young, the creative man. An outstanding soldier with multiple talents that were obviously refined due to the isolation of being a black officer in the segregated armed forces. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to become acquainted with his creative work. He was a poet, playwright, composer, musician, diplomat, educator, and a friend of the men who served with him. We're fortunate Charles Young left a treasure trove of material to document his talents, especially his poetry. I share a common interest with him on that subject. A verse is a snapshot of the poet's mindset at the time the work was created or ended. I would like to share with you a snapshot of the colonel's mindset when his focus was not soldiering. His cultural and spiritual sensitivities are reflected in the following 2 verses. Titled African Dirge. Let the women weep and wail for the souls that take its flight. Let the strong warrior's spirit squeal of the men who stand in fright. Hear the death chant of despair with the bush priest sadly croons. See the old wives ash their hair, looking on the ones that swoon. Friends and kinsmen crowd around, watch for signs of final tear. Then let sorrow's shriek resounds from your huts both far and near. Lest the heavy hand of death close upon another breath, bear the body forth in air, chanting dole and deep despair. Weep and wail till the spirit's throne bid you break your sorrow fast, singing aloud their victory song, mourners cease, he's home at last. Hill of death, see him ascend, white robes reaching forth his hand, to greet which they lend, sing, he's safe in morning's land. The next verse is called Never. There's never a song in the twilight, but someone's sad heart eases pain. There's never a rose in the sunlight, but someone's tired eyes smile again. There's never a breeze on the hilltops, but some healing wing is unfurled. There's never a star shining in heaven, but some sliver green lights the world. Thank the Lord for living, thank the Lord for life. There's never a gloomy horizon, but sunsets have a still to adorn. There's never a lark in the meadow, but greet with his heart song the morn. There's never a mist on the valley, but tell of the mountains above. And God gives to each of his creatures a task of thanksgiving and love. So thank the Lord for living, thank the Lord for life. End of verse. Charles Young bared his humanity through his poetry. However, with all of his talents, what he wanted most was to stand in the defense of the country. Charles Young believed his place leading African-American soldiers was in the war against Germany. He expected the Army to select him to command the Black Regiment. Despite endorsements from Major General Pershing, the offer was never made. Instead, on July the 17th, 1917, he was promoted to colonel, becoming the first Black American to hold that rank in the United States Armed Forces. The news that followed informed him that he was being medically discharged from active duty. The Army viewed him medically unfit for service. After exhausting all other means to prove his fitness, on June the 6th, 1918, Charles Young departed from Wilberforce, Ohio on horseback en route to Washington, D.C. He covered the 497 miles in 16 days as a demonstration of his fitness to the War Department. Colonel Young was returned to active duty on November 6, 1918, 5 days before the signing of the armistice ending World War I. Also ended was the possibility of him becoming the first Black general in the United States military. None could better describe Charles Young's life than his friend, NAACP founder W.E.B. Du Bois. He wrote the following eulogy to his friend. It appeared in the February 1922 issue of the Crisis magazine. Quote, "The life of Charles Young was a triumph of tragedy. No one knew the truth about the hell he went through at West Point. He seldom even mentioned it. The pain was too great. Few knew what faced him always in his Army life. It was not enough for him to do well. He must always do better, and so conspicuously better as to disarm the scoundrels that trailed him. He lived in the Army surrounded by insult and intrigue, and yet he set his teeth and soul serene and triumphed. He was one of the few men I know who literally turned the other cheek with Jesus Christ. He was laughed at for it, and his own people chided him bitterly, yet he persisted. When a white Southern pygmy at West Point protested at taking food first from a dish passed to Young, Young passed it to him first, and afterwards to himself. When white officers of inferior rank refused to salute a colored officer, he saluted them. Seldom did he lose his temper, seldom complain. With his own people, he was always the genteel, hearty, half-boyish friend. He kissed the girls, slapped the boys on the back, threw his arms about his friends, scattered his money in charity. Only now and then behind the veil did his nearest comrade see the hurt and pain graven on his heart. And when it appeared, he promptly drowned it in his music. His beloved music, which poured quickly from his nervous fingers to caress and bathe his soul. Steadily, unswervingly, he did his duty. And duty to him, as to few modern men, was spelled in capitals. It was his lodestar, his soul, and neither force nor reason swerved him from it. His second going to Africa after a terrible attack of black water fever was suicide. He knew it, his wife knew it, his friends knew it. He had been sent to Africa because the Army considered his blood pressure too high to let him go to Europe. They sent him there to die. They sent him there because he was one of the very best officers in the service. And if he'd gone to Europe, he could not have been denied the stars of a general. They could not stand a black American general. Therefore, they sent him to the fever coast of Africa. They ordered him to make roads back in the haunted jungles. He knew what they wanted and intended. He could have escaped it by accepting his retirement from active service, refusing his call to active duty, and then he could have lounged and lived at leisure on his retirement pay. But Africa needed him. He did not yell and collect money and advertise great schemes and parade in crimson. He just went quietly, ignoring appeal and protests. He is dead, but the heart of the great black race, the Ancient of Days, the undying and eternal, rises and salutes his shining memory. Well done, Charles Young, soldiering man and unswerving friend, end quote. Colonel Young was only the fourth soldier honored with a funeral service held in Arlington Amphitheater that was attended by thousands. What compelled Young to be the man he was? Was it a crusade against the prejudice, injustice, and violence directed against blacks during his lifetime? Or was it mostly ambition to achieve success and greatness? Was it a deep-seated faith in God? Or was it his belief in a universal human quality or moral code governing the conduct of human affairs? Was he the product of a stern upbringing, a father who taught him to love and serve his country, and a mother who schooled the importance of education? Or was he a self-made man who learned the lessons of life and leadership during a challenging career as a black officer in a segregated army? Was he a stern and serious taskmaster, or was he a man who loved to laugh and sing? Charles Young was all things in different measures at all times in his life. He was selfless, faithful, moral, loving, curious, and kind. He was ambitious, vain, hard-headed, tough, intense, and demanding. Above all, he knew himself very well. His service made a difference. He did not make it to Europe, but many of the black officers he trained was there. His service paved the way for Benjamin O. Davis Sr., his protege, to become the first black general in the regular armed forces. Every minority service person to reach the flag or general officer's rank in the armed forces owed a sense of gratitude to Colonel Charles Young. They stood on his shoulders to reach for their stars. In 147 years of history, between the Boston Massacre and the first black American reaching the rank of colonel in the United States Armed Forces in 1917, from Charles Young's death in 1922 to present day, we've had many firsts. The first black paratroopers, the Triple Nickel, the first black tank battalion. The most noted is the 761st Black Panther Tank Battalion. They spearheaded General George Patton's drive through Europe in World War II. There were the first black pilots, the Tuskegee Airmen. The Navy commissioned its first 13 black officers who became known as the Golden 13. We've had our first black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell, and the first black commander-in-chief of the armed forces, former President Barack Obama in 2008. From colonel to commander-in-chief in 86 years is impressive. Our advocacy on the behalf of Colonel Young is to give the soldier the honor in death that he deserved in life. One day we would like to see him given the honorary title of Brigadier General. We have asked the state of Kentucky and Ohio to grant the honorary promotions through their state militias. We would like to see a statue of the colonel on horseback in our nation's capital to memorialize his 1918 ride. The Colonel Charles Young Veteran Memorial is a fitting honor to the legacy of a native son and the many who served with him. And I'm honored to be here today as a part of this program. I close with the reading of a verse I wrote and dedicated to Colonel Young titled, "What Shall I Tell Thee?" If thou shall ever wonder, how do ye muster the strength to face the unknown? I'll offer you this reply. When the wolves of life snaps at your heels, deny their existence by not looking down. When the daggers of hardship are pointed at your back, keep your eyes to the heavens and refuse to look back. You may hear the sound of the phantom as it dwells outside your door. And the friends who once were many do not come around anymore. Keep the faith. The hardship will pass. You may hear the chuckle of the pretenders as they label you the fool, but pay them no mind. They didn't make you what you are, nor can they deny you your destiny. They have yet to learn. The biggest fools of all are those who cast the labels. They are the victims of their own generalizations. Keep the faith. The burden is theirs to bear. So I say to you, give your best in spite of the tests, to your dreams vowed to be true. And know in your soul, the faith that you hold is the strength that will carry you through. Your will is built by your courage. So face the unknown with a sigh. It matters not whether you succeed or fail. What counts is the fact that you try. Keep the faith. Thank you.